it's needed. Almost 10 in the aspiration in the Agenda 2063 adopted in 2013, which contains 7 aspirations. The third aspiration aims at an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. The consultations for the preparation of this Agenda 2063, as well as the dynamism of the continent's non-governmental organizations and African civil society in general, show that human rights continue to be of particular concern to us, despite the significant improvements recorded since the adoption of the African Charter, as well as the establishment of this commission until today. Almost 10 years down the road, the African Union member states, the African Union organs, African communities, and citizens have embarked on a special project, that of evaluating the first 10-year implementation plan of the Agenda 2063 and building on lessons learned, gaps identified, the emerging issues, challenges, and opportunities, then come up with a new plan for the next 10 years. I'm inviting the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and all its stakeholders here present to actively get involved in this process. Your inputs, indeed, is highly valuable. Your Excellencies, while this is a time for celebration, the present commemoration must serve as a platform for discussion and exchange among all actors and stakeholders in order to carry out together an objective introspection and evaluation of the many contributions and persistent and emerging challenges that still remain in the promotion and protection of human rights on the African continent. In view of the persistence of armed and communal conflicts and constitutional changes in power, the effects of climate change, the economic recession due to the consequences of the COVID-19, and many other challenges, it will be necessary for us to grasp and understand the scope of all the opportunities that this Commission has offered us over the past 35 years, and to draw inspiration from its jurisprudence, principles, and guidelines, general observations, concluding observations, recommendations, which it has elaborated and adopted, and which are endorsed by the policy-making organs of the African Union. It's only in this way that we can identify new strategies, means, and programs with a view to optimizing our efforts towards the effective respect of human rights on our continent. I wish to remind every one of us that the issue of human rights is at the heart of the African Union's policy. It's in this context that it has already adopted a strategic plan for the promotion and protection of human and people's rights for the period running from 2021 to 2030, which lays down important guidelines for the Union's overall policy on the promotion and protection of human rights. Member states, the African Union organs, and various partners should be guided by it to align their actions and comply with the principles contained therein. In concluding, allow me to thank again the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for his invitation to this August Assembly. I wish you all a very fruitful session and successful deliberations which contribute to the advancement of human rights in Africa. On this note, I wish also to wish all of us happy anniversary of 35 years of this commission. Your Excellency, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, at this juncture, on account of pressure of time, it is with great honor that I invite His Excellency Badara Alieu Diouf, Vice President of the Republic of the Gambia, to deliver his statement and declare the 73rd Ordinary Session of the Commission open. Will you forgive the reversal of protocols and sequencing in the circumstances? Your Excellency.
Madam Chairperson, my Lord, the Chief Justice of the Republic of the Gambia, Your Excellency, the representative of the President of Senegal, Your Excellency, the Deputy Chair of the African Union Commission, Your Excellencies, Commissioners of the African Commission of Human Rights, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, honorable ministers here present, members of the National Assembly, members of the national human rights institutions, chairperson of the NGO Forum, delegates from the African continent and beyond, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chairperson, please allow me to congratulate the newly sworn-in Commissioner. Mr. Commissioner, congratulations. I stand here on the mandate of His Excellency, the President, to deliver his statement, and it reads thus. I must first and foremost extend my fraternal greetings and heartfelt welcome to the chairperson and commissioners and to all delegates for gracing this occasion. I was made to understand that the last time the Commission and its delegates met was 3 years ago. Welcome to Banjul and to the home of the African Commission. Madam Chairperson, notwithstanding the pandemic, the Commission has been able to perform its functions and has been meeting all in an attempt to resolve serious issues confronting the African continent. I must use this unique opportunity to commend the African Commission for the work it has been doing in the interest of creating a better Africa for all of us. You will recall that the Gambia government established the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, the TRRC, through an act of National Assembly to investigate and create an impartial record of human rights abuses committed from 1994 to early 2017 in order to deliver justice, accountability, promote healing and reconciliation to all persons affected during this period. The TRRC has delivered on its mandate and provided a report to me on the 25th of November 2021. The entire report was made public 1 month after its presentation, and I directed that work on the white paper be commenced through a very consultative and inclusive process. On the 25th of May 2022, the government released its white paper on the report of the TRRC. The white paper represents the government's position on the recommendations of the TRRC. The white paper is unprecedented in the history of Truth Commission, given the reactions made. The government accepted all except 2. We are confident that as a government, we now have a clear roadmap towards reconciliation, justice reparation, and ensuring non-reoccurrence. The implementation of the white paper will see the introduction of broad-based reforms which the government intends to carry out. Enforced disappearances, sexual and gender-based violence were prevalent themes during the TRRC. The government wishes to underscore its commitment to implement the recommendations of the TRRC by investing more on education, research, training, and behavioral change. On enforced disappearances, this remains a matter of great concern to the government. Efforts will continue to be made to work with families and partners with a view to continuing the search and conducting exhumations on identifying sites to bring closure to the family. The victims of the human rights violations and abuses will continue to receive the attention of the government. We must, however, acknowledge that may be beyond the reach of the government. We therefore invite our partners and the international community to render assistance and support in this regard. The reparations bill is being currently considered at the level of the National Assembly, and it will constitute an agency that will be victims-led to carry out the granting of reparations to victims. It would be recalled that the government had earlier made an allocation of $50 million to the TRRC to carry out reparations. An additional over $100 million was also placed in this year's budget in the expectations of commencing reparations through the proposed Reparations Act has revealed that we are a nation very much in need of healing and reconciliation. Government will continue to invest heavily to ensure the reconciliation of all Gambians, victims, perpetrators, and citizens of our country. In this regard, work is already underway for the establishment of a National Peace Council, that accountability and justice must be pursued. The TRRC has outlined those it deems most responsible for the atrocities committed under the previous regime. In this regard, we are in the process of putting in the necessary mechanisms to ensure justice for the victims. To this end, we shall establish the necessary legal frameworks to try international crimes such as torture, enforced disappearances, and crime against humanity, being crimes that took place on Gambian soil. The government will not relent in its effort to ensure justice for the victims. The way has already been paved with the successful completion of the NIA 9 trial responsible for a brutal killing of Swallow Sandeng and the trial of a former junta leader responsible for the death of a former minister. We are committed to ensure a better and brighter future for all Gambians to live side by side in peace and security. And never again shall we permit the abuses under the former regime to re-echo on Gambian territory. As we celebrate the 35th anniversary of the establishment of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in this country, it is worthwhile to recollect that the Gambia co-sponsored with other African countries the establishment of the African Charter on People's and Human Rights in 1979 for the promotion and protection of human rights and basic freedoms on the African continent. It was in recognition of this important role demonstrated by the Gambia in the adoption of the Charter that it was unanimously called the Banjul Charter on Human and People's Rights. It was in Banjul that the draft provisions of the Charter were negotiated and concluded before its final adoption by the authority of the heads of state and government of the then OAU, now African Union, in 1981 in Nairobi, Kenya. Our commitment and determination as a vanguard for promotion and protection of human rights as a country also led further to the establishment of the headquarters of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Banjul in December 1987. The Commission is a creation of the Charter, and it provides oversight and interpretation of its provisions. It should therefore not be surprising that the Gambia has a special affinity with the African Commission. Let me hasten to add that the Commission is independent. Members of the Commission serve in their personal capacity and make a solemn declaration to discharge their duties impartially and faithfully. This milestone event has also been complemented by national efforts in the establishment of the African Center for the Promotion of Democracy and Human Rights Studies through an act of the then Parliament. The Gambia, at a very early age in its development, laid very strong foundation for the respect, promotion, and fulfillment of human rights. In 2017, Madam Chair, and for the first time in the history of this country, the Gambia established a National Human Rights Commission under my government. The Commission has been fully operational and continues to play a significant role in the promotion, respect, and fulfillment of human rights. It participated meaningfully in the monitoring of the last presidential and National Assembly elections. National Human Rights Commissions are by their nature independent and effectiveness specifically placed on hold governments accountable and promote and advance human rights as well as serve as agents of change. An effective National Human Rights Commission is therefore a strong and a solid pillar for the entrenchment of democracy and the rule of law. There is very good reason why national commissions must ensure their continuous compliance with the Paris Principles and jealously guard their independence. We are proud today that our National Human Rights Commission has gone through an accreditation process with the Global Alliance of Human Rights Commissions, which provides international benchmarks against which national human rights institutions can be accredited. And the Gambia National Human Rights Commission emerged successfully with an A status. The accreditation will undoubtedly enhance the credibility and confer international recognition, as well as participation in the work of Human Rights Council and other United Nations mechanisms and processes. The Commission is also an integral part of the network of African national human rights institutions. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the African Union's theme of this year is the Year of Nutrition. Strengthening resilience in nutrition and food security on the African continent is indeed highly appropriate and relevant. We are witnessing today very high prices. COVID-19 pandemic is taking its toll and imposed numerous problems on us all. And now we are witnessing the Russian-Ukraine war, which has triggered off increases globally in the prices of food, oil, and gas, with the hardest hit being the oil importing countries. These developments have also been compounded acutely by existing problems on the African continent. They cut across the whole continent. We recognize under the Constitutive Act of the African Union that the scourge of conflict in Africa constitutes a major impediment to the socio-economic development of the continent and the need to promote peace and prosperity. Madam Chair, why is there that ceaseless conflict between principle and practice, between ideal and reality, between development and conflict, whilst Africa's children are running naked and underfed? It is high time the continent is the risk of conflict. It is high time the continent is the risk of hunger. It is high time the continent is the risk of coups. The khaki boys with their AK-47s have had their say, and it was no less better. The providence of the future for Africa does not lie in the barrel of the AK-47, but in strong institutions, sound policies, implementable programs. The guns in Africa has to go silent. National interest precedes and supersedes individual or political expedience. Madam Chair, On that note, I have the singular honor to declare the 73rd Ordinary Session and the 35th anniversary of the African Commission on People's Rights here in Banjul open. I thank you all.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
No, that's right.
May the band continue as the chairperson of the African Commission on Human People's Rights escorts our high-level dignitaries out of the plenary room. Please give us a piece. We'll take a short interlude. Your Excellencies, if we could all take our seats once again and try and reconstitute the order of these proceedings. Your Excellencies, given the rearrangement of the program, the order will now read as follows. We will revert to the order of the initial proceedings, which would be to call upon the chairperson of the Network for African National Human Rights Institutions. After that, we will call upon His Excellency the representative of the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. Thereafter, we will call upon Deputy Regional Representative East Africa, Regional Office of the United Nations, of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Thereafter, we will take a brief interlude, which will be followed by the statement of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, which is delivered by His Excellency Ambassador Salah Hamad. And thereafter, we will call upon the statement of the representative of state parties, and thereafter the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And the final statement for the day will be the commemorative statement or address of His Lordship Chief Justice. But before that, just before His Lordship's address, we will have another interlude. So that is now the new order of delivery of this meeting. Excuse me. We will also invite His Excellency, the representative of the Republic of Senegal, and that would bring us to the end of this meeting. So at this stage, may I invite His Excellency, Honorable Chairperson of the Commission, to the podium, yield it to him for the launching of a commemorative publication.
Simplement, oui, je salue tous les participants, disais-je, Excellence, Monsieur le représentant du président Macky Sall et le ministre de la Justice. Notre programme a un tout petit peu été modifié en raison des contraintes des calendriers des autorités gambiennes et également en raison de leur agenda, qui était un tout petit peu différent ce matin des urgences de ce pays. Mais comme vous le savez, la Commission est en train de fêter ses 35 ans d'existence aujourd'hui, et à cette occasion, rien de plus significatif, rien de plus symbolique qu'à cette occasion que nous puissions procéder au lancement d'un document important qui sera un document de référence. Il s'agit du Code du droit africain, des droits de l'homme et des peuples. L'idée à la base, c'était de rassembler l'essentiel, en tout cas l'intégralité des textes qui ont été adoptés autour de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, c'est-à-dire la charte elle-même, ses protocoles, ainsi que le règlement intérieur qui engage la Commission, celui de 2010 et celui de 2020. Ça sera l'instrument de référence pour ceux qui veulent entrer en commerce en relation avec la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Nous n'allons pas tarder, conformément à nos coutumes, lorsque nous lançons un document important, il suffit de prendre l'exemplaire que les honorables commissaires ont et les membres du podium, juste se mettre debout pour une séance photo, et ça sera ça qui fait office de lancement officiel. Après, le protocole, qui est un tout petit peu en retard, veillera à ce que les membres qui sont dans la salle puissent, les délégations des États, des INDH et des organisations de la société civile, puissent également avoir un exemplaire. Ainsi donc, avec tout le respect que je dois au podium et au commissaire, je voudrais vous inviter à vous mettre debout pour présenter ce code à la communauté africaine qui en fera désormais usage. On peut se mettre debout et présenter le code. En se mettant debout, je pense, comme on le fait d'habitude. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Okay. Now you continue with the...
Thank you, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for joining with us in raising this compendium of African human and people's rights law. It's a publication that the Commission hopes will be a useful resource to all our stakeholders. We resume now the procedure that I've earlier indicated. I would now like to call upon the chairperson of the Network for African National Human Rights Institutions, Dr. Elasto Mugwadi, to deliver his statement. Dr. Mugwadi.
Thank you, Director of the occasion. Now, in absentia, Your Excellency, Vice President of the Republic of the Gambia, representing the President, Excellency Minister of Justice of Senegal, representing the President and the Chairperson of the African Union, the Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Remingo Ilumbu, distinguished representatives of the African Union member states, honorable members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, representatives of the African National Human Rights Institutions, NHRI, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of civil society organizations, NGOs and other actors here present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, I would also like to thank the Commission, the African Commission, on celebrating its 35th anniversary since it was born in 1987. Since establishment, the African Commission has become a respected body regionally and internationally, as it has been a voice of the downtrodden and marginalized on the continent. We must congratulate the African Commission for the long journey it has walked in spite of many challenges. It has been a long but fruitful journey from the inaugural session, which was convened on 2nd November 1987 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to this 73rd session. Honorable delegates, kindly join me in congratulating the African Commission for this phenomenal feat. We are honorable delegates gathered here, but as African Commission's human rights institutions, we lament unconstitutional and undemocratic change of guards in governments that are taking place, And in particular, may I be allowed to mention the recent developments in Burkina Faso, which actually adds to dozens other stubborn armed conflicts on the continent, which are defying the African Union's call of silencing the guns as one of the precursors to socio-economic development. While we applaud the African Union and its agencies in interventions on armed conflicts, especially the coups, it is apparent are ineffective in cultivating sustainable peace. In this regard, we call for a re-evaluation of the current efforts for a long-term multi-stakeholder approach that goes deeper into engaging the public in weaving lasting solutions. We further call for strengthening and the integration of coordinated efforts of national, sub-regional, and regional early warning systems focused more on prevention. Distinguished commissioners, honorable delegates, the impact of armed conflict in one country is no longer a matter of one state. Indeed, as of December 2021, internally displaced persons, refugees, and asylum seekers all accounted for more than 11.6 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. Displacements have also been compounded by climate change and other natural disasters, which have driven more than 2.6 million people in sub-Saharan Africa out of their homes. As life becomes even harder, more youths are in transit within the region as others take tumultuous journeys to Europe, Middle East, among other destinations outside the continent, with the hope of escaping from abject poverty. This, however, has dire repercussions as migrants perish along the corridors of migration. As you may recall, in June 2022, more than 20 youths died in Morocco attempting to cross into Europe. The dead were among about 2,000 African migrants, with some reports indicating that most of them were from Sudan, a country that sank into political turmoil since Omar al-Bashir was also. It is tragic that the youth we expected to be the energy driving the continent towards the Africa we want are putting their lives at stake in seeking better opportunities elsewhere and not in the continent. On the other hand, protective policies have precipitated animosity against migration within Africa. Tensions and the fears of xenophobic attacks linger at a time that the continent is seeking to collapse borders to allow for free movement of people, to promote trade and other benefits through a visa-free Africa initiative, a flagship project under Agenda 2063 of the African Union. We recognize interventions from the regional economic communities, but more needs to be done to erase suspicion, cultivate trust towards building one Africa through regularizing movement within the continent. Honorable commissioners, distinguished delegates, in addition to the already vulnerable situation of armed conflicts, the continent has been engulfed by famine. While famine can be attributed to unreliable absence of rain due to climatic changes, a lot remains to be done to reverse this phenomenon. COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine have also been blamed for the food crisis in Africa. Furthermore, many African countries are yet to fulfill the Maputo Declaration of committing at least 10% of national budget to agriculture. As of September 2022, more than 46 million people in Africa were grappling with hunger. National and international multi-agencies have responded to the crisis in diverse ways. This is, however, not sustainable. While pandemics, epidemics, and other environmental issues are unpredictable, resilient measures remain fragile and, in some cases, unable to adequately respond to these challenges. This is tragic, and yet it has been said Africa is the continent of the century. One is tempted to pose rhetorical questions. How can we be the continent of the century when only 33 million smallholder farmers, most of them ill-equipped, feed the 1.4 billion population? How can we be the continent of the century when Africa imports more food than it produces, and yet we boast of 60% of the world arable but uncultivated land? How can we, ladies and gentlemen, be the continent of the century when we rely on relief food from outside for our starving populations? How can we, finally, be the continent of the century when we spend billions of US dollars importing food when we can easily trade among ourselves to improve our economies? It is rather tough self-humiliation for post-independent Africa, which is supposed to be an equal partner in trade and not a recipient. Honorable Commissioners, various studies, including the non-research on business and human rights and sustainable oceans, have called for alignment of national and regional interventions in combating climate change as guided by Agenda 2030 and the UN of the UN and Agenda 26.3 of the African Union. We have carried out a study to support the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, but we cannot trade between and among ourselves when we are not producing goods and services. We cannot trade between and among ourselves under the framework of the ACHPR when multinational companies are investing and controlling more enterprises in Africa than ourselves. Indeed, that is why our study on the implication of the ACHPR on human rights, which will be published soon, highlights the role of human rights actors, including national human rights institutions, in offering a human rights-based approach to implementation of this trade agreement. In addition, we have just held the 5th NHRI's forum on the margins of this 73rd ordinary session, which adopted a draft resolution on human rights-based approach to implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It takes account of the fact that while the negotiations to the adoption of the trade framework were exclusive, we expect NHRIs and other human rights actors to make substantive contributions alongside their commitment on implementation of Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063. Even as we expect the increased investment in line with the FTA and other initiatives under Agenda 2063, it should worry each one of us here how we are going to protect, respect, and remedy human rights. On this note, we call upon African states to work with NHRIs, CSOs, and other actors in developing national action plans, NAPs. We also call on the members of the African Union to expedite finalization and adoption of the regional draft policy framework on business and human rights. These and more frameworks will assist in protection, respect, and remedying of human rights violations in relation to business. Honorable Commissioners, while national human rights institutions and civil society organizations are key to human rights-based approaches to the implementation of the ACHPR, ending conflict and contributing to sustainable peace, they must enjoy freedom in their operations for optimum impact. In the context of armed conflicts, including terrorism, the space for operation of human rights defenders has been shifting towards silencing alternative voices to the state in systematic criminalization of dissent. While NHRIs face reprisals mainly through budget cuts, CSOs, journalists, and other rights defenders have fallen victims to enforced disappearances, arrests, and intimidations, detentions without trial, and displacements. Instead of adopting laws protecting human rights defenders, some states, I believe, are legislating to curtail freedom of expression, even online. May we remind states that the responsibility over human rights is not a favor, it is a duty. The other actors are supporting states to meet this obligation, hence the need for better legislation to allow for a vibrant media and civil society working with state agencies like NHRIs, the judiciary, the police, and the police oversight authorities, amongst others. Honorable Commissioners, in conclusion, allow me to assure the Commission of our commitment towards our common goal of human rights for all in Africa. I also urge the Commission to consider and act on the resolution of the 5th National Human Rights Institutions Forum. I wish you all fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mugwadi, for your statement. As MC of these proceedings, it was gratifying to see the number of stakeholders that were interested in our publication. It did, however, disrupt the attention that was due to the speaker who has just spoken. I'd urge for order during the proceedings, particularly if there is someone speaking at the podium. Thank you for your cooperation. I would now like to invite His Excellency Corrado Pampoloni to deliver a statement on behalf of the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, honorable representative of the Chair of the African Union, honorable ministers, esteemed commissioners, Union member states, Excellency the Chief Justice, the acting head of AGA, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of the civil society organization, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. It is a great privilege to be with you today representing the European Union and to address the opening ceremony of this 73rd session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission has not interrupted their work, and it is indeed a joy to see in-person sessions resume, as they allow for more fruitful interactions. What a suitable celebration of the 35th anniversary of the Commission, marking its steadfast engagement on behalf of the citizens of the continent. During these 35 years, the Commission has worked for the promotion of human and people's rights, protection of these rights, and contribute to the interpretation of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Your 2021-2025 strategic plan clearly articulates the activities which aim at that, be they connected to sensitization and information dissemination, to the complementarity with other organs, here represented today, and to the strengthening of the legal system and institutional frameworks, such as the National Human Rights Institution, special mechanism, I beg your pardon. Working groups, promotion missions have continued to raise awareness to the rights of women, forced disappearance, conditions in prison, among many other subjects. You are also working on enhancing the monitoring, follow-up and tracking of compliance by state parties. Sadly, not all member states have submitted reports yet, but you have bravely continued your work against the lack of political will and the difficulty of implementing your findings and recommendations at national level. You have continued to work on behalf of the African citizens, using your urgent appeals in matters posing an imminent danger of irreparable harm to individuals. In a world where human rights violations continue to be an ugly, dark reality, you have kept the light on, showing your state parties how to do better for its citizens. The European Union's relationship with Africa is one of strategic partnership with shared interest as well as proximity. It covered a multitude of layers, including human rights, peace, security, good governance, trade, investment, development, climate change, digitalization, migration, and human mobility. We reaffirmed this commitment at our 6th EU-AU summit last February, making public our joint vision for 2030. This renewed partnership keeps human rights and democracy at its core, as we reiterated our commitment to respect and promote compliance with human rights and to work together to promote effective multilateralism within the rule-based international order. Our annual human rights dialogue is a concrete demonstration of the seriousness of our commitment to promote and protect human rights on both continents and worldwide. Our 18th EU-AU Human Rights Dialogue is just around the corner. Taking place on December the 5th, Commissioner Banco will be co-chairing with our EU Special Representative for Human Rights, Eamon Gilmore. After 2 years of virtual format, the dialogue will now be held in person in Brussels, and we are hoping that the African Commission on Human People Rights will be able to participate. The last edition of our Human Rights Dialogue have confirmed our common interest to together advance the human rights agenda on both continents, in particular the abolition of the death penalty, the right to development, gender equality and women's empowerment, and how to better protect electoral and democracy integrity. We intensified our discussion on business and human rights needed worldwide in order to prevent, address and remedy negative human rights impact caused by business activities. We congratulate the AU and UNDP for holding the first African Business and Human Rights Forum some weeks ago in Accra. We have also discussed transitional justice and will follow on this discussion with a dedicated expert seminar next November taking place here in Banjul. We must maintain an open dialogue with civil society based on mutual trust and transparency. The contribution of the civil society of crucial importance in all our human rights work, which include access and receive accreditation to human rights organs for organizations representing persons in vulnerable positions. We are therefore very happy that, as happened before the pandemic, civil society organizations from both continents will this year meet again ahead of the Human Rights Dialogue. This 10th edition of their forum shall review recommendations, guiding us in better ways to work together moving forward. We would like to reiterate that the participation of the EU human rights organs, including this Commission, is critical to the success of this dialogue. Your engagement and strategic cooperation with the EU is crucial to us, in addition to the essential work you do supporting the EU. In recognition of the importance of your action, we are continuing to support your work through our African Governance Architecture support program, now on its 2nd edition. Like the African Union, the European Union was founded to foster peace and prosperity, and it is our experience that peace and prosperity is one member state leads to the same in others. No country or region operates in a vacuum. We all know that respecting human rights is not a political choice for countries or government. It is a legal obligation rooted in international and regional human rights instruments, such as the African Charter on Human and People Rights, which last year celebrated its 40th anniversary. We look forward to continuing our cooperation with the AU and its human rights organs, as we are stronger and most resilient when we work together. It is an honor to join you at this Commission session by the side of the United Nations, the National Human Rights Institution, the African Court on Human and People Rights, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, non-governmental organization and representative of state parties, including our host, the government of the Gambia. Thank you for the honor of participating in your opening section. On behalf of the European Union, I wish you all the best for deliberation in this 73rd ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People Rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. I would now like to call upon the Deputy Regional Representative of East Africa Regional Office of the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Maimuchwa Lauriston, to deliver her statement. Sorry, it's a bit of a tongue twister. You have the floor.
Your Excellencies, Minister of Justice of Senegal and representative of the AU Chairperson, Your Excellency, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency, Chief Justice of the Gambia, Monsieur le Président de la Commission africaine des droits des humains et des peuples, Messieurs, Dames les honorables commissaires, chers délégués. Vous me voyez ici honoré de faire ces quelques remarques au nom du Haut-Commissaire aux droits humains à l'occasion de l'ouverture de la 73e session de la Commission africaine des droits des humains et des peuples. Et ce, au moment où la communauté internationale célèbre le 35e anniversaire de la création de cette auguste institution. Nous, au HCDH, avons en grande estime la collaboration entre nos deux institutions, formalisée par un accord signé en 2019. Le HCDH demeure enthousiaste à l'idée que nos deux institutions continuent à travailler dans un esprit de complémentarité afin de promouvoir et protéger les droits humains sur le continent africain. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished delegates, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the cooperation and implementation of joint activities by our institutions slowed. However, OHCHR stands ready to ramp up efforts to implement joint activities in light of the lifting of the various COVID-19 restrictions. The recent technical consultation that OHCHR organized with African Union organs with a human rights mandate in Lusaka, Zambia, on 10 and 11 July 2022, provided us with the opportunity to take stock of the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding, to identify and draw up a work plan of joint activity. I am also pleased to report on 3 key areas that our office has been able to focus on in collaboration with your institution and other AU organs. First, on early warning and conflict prevention. I note that your study on addressing human rights in conflict situations has clearly identified the critical importance that human rights play in all phases of the conflict cycle. The study's recommendation, your Resolution 332, and various other resolutions by the African Union Peace and Security Council recognize the urgent need for institutionalizing a human rights-based approach to conflict prevention, management, and resolution on the continent. There is similar recognition within the UN on the inherent preventive power of human rights. The UN Secretary General's Call to Action for Human Rights, launched in February 2020, as a transformative vision of human rights for the UN system as a whole, highlighted the important point that prevention is the best form of protection. I am delighted to note the positive and growing collaboration between your institution and OHCHR Regional Office in East Africa, which is leading the office in its engagement with the African Union, in supporting efforts to strengthen the AU's continental early warning and conflict prevention system. This partnership, which is supported by the joint AU-OHCHR World Bank program, seeks to advance human rights integration in early warning and conflict prevention. I am confident that this partnership will greatly contribute to further strengthen the innovative and pioneering African Union continental early warning and conflict prevention system. Second, this year we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Addis Ababa Roadmap, signed in 2012. The Addis Ababa Roadmap provides a guiding framework to encourage special procedures mechanism of the United Nations and of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to strengthen cooperation in a number of ways, including by conducting joint activities, issuing joint statements, undertaking joint country visits, exchanging information on upcoming events, and strengthening follow-up to recommendations. The implementation of the Addis Ababa Roadmap has witnessed many achievements, but has also remained constrained by challenges, some of a structural nature and other more functional and programmatic. This anniversary thus gives us a unique opportunity to reflect on these challenges and strengthen the vision for the Addis Ababa Roadmap for the next decade. A vision that our office hopes will be innovative, inclusive of different actors' contributions, nimble and agile, to be able to respond to the many human rights challenges. Third, OHCHR promotes human rights mainstreaming, including the right to development in trade and investment agreements to foster their contribution to sustainable development in Africa. International trade law has largely grown in isolation from human rights norms and standards, despite the profound impact that trade liberalizations may have on human rights. Human rights provides guidance and tools for states to ensure that these agreements lead to inclusive and sustainable development outcomes. Jointly with the Economic Commission for Africa and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, OHCHR has undertaken an ex-ante human rights impact assessment of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and continues supporting a human rights respectful and people-centered implementation of the agreement in line with its objective to contribute to inclusive and sustainable development in Africa. OHCHR is also pleased to have supported the NGO Forum and the Forum of National Human Rights Institutions that took place immediately before this session, which discussed the interlinkages between trade and human rights, and made recommendations that are important in supporting efforts to maintain human rights into the AFCFTA processes. Honorable Chairperson, This year marks the 40th anniversary of the UN Voluntary Fund for Victims of Torture and the 30th anniversary of the UN Voluntary Trust Fund on Contemporary Forms of Slavery. These funds have been providing vital assistance to victims of grave human rights violations through yearly grants to civil society organizations. The Torture Fund has continued to provide emergency assistance and conduct human rights outreach to those in need, including the survivors of conflict in Ethiopia. The Slavery Fund is providing support to build the capacity of grassroots organizations addressing the needs of survivors of traditional and recent-based slavery in Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. I call on states to continue to support the funds, including by joining the group of friends of Voluntary Fund for Victims of Torture. Honorable Chairperson, I would be remiss if I did not mention the various human rights challenges that the continent continues to face in the post-COVID-19 context, such as threats of war and actual conflict, unconstitutional changes of government, popular discontent with government, extreme poverty, largely arising from human rights violations and the failure to realize social and economic rights. I wish to underscore the criticality of your institution in holding states to account for their human rights obligation as the continent continues to bear the brunt of the human rights impact of unconstitutional changes of power, rising inequalities, climate change, COVID-19, forced and perilous migration. There is no doubt that human rights protection is one of the critical responses to these multiple challenges. Honorable Chairperson, I am aware that you have a heavy program ahead of you for the next 3 weeks. I therefore would like to extend the best wishes from the High Commissioner to all of you for a successful and productive session. Merci de votre attention.
Thank you, Ms. Lauritsen, for your statement on behalf of the East Africa Regional Office of the United Nations, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We will now, at this stage, just take a short interlude. I would like to invite Ms. Doreen Apollo to approach the lectern. Following feedback from our stakeholders and an overarching need to revamp and harmonize the logo of the Commission, as well as its website, we have the privilege at this point to invite the Chief Advisor on Communications Matters at the African Union Commission, Ms. Doreen Apollos, to approach and facilitate the launch of our new logo and website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mme. Lindewe. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished participants. In the interest of time, allow me to stand on standing protocol. My name is Doreen Apollos. I am a communication advisor at the African Union Commission, and it is a great honor and privilege to steer you through this particular session of our program this afternoon. Today is an exciting day for all of us, but mostly for the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, as they unveil their new identity logo and their revamped website. At this particular juncture, Excellencies, distinguished guests, allow me to convey the warm greetings and support from the African Union Commission, Director of Information and Communication, Madam Leslie Richer, who would have wanted to join us today for this particular session, but had other prior engagements of similar importance. Excellencies, distinguished participants, as the Directorate of Information and Communication, we have had the privilege to walk this journey with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights as they sought to implement the decisions of the African Union to enhance the communication, publicity, and visibility of the African Union and all its institutions to ensure that we are speaking as one family, to ensure this coherence in our identity as the African Union organization, and to enhance our brand equity within the continent and globally. The rebranding of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is aligned to Africa's Agenda 2063, which clearly stipulates that the African Union is a people-centered organization, and as such, we have a duty to ensure that the organization is well known and its mandate and projects are well understood by all Africans across the continent to enable us to engage, to co-create solutions to the challenges that we face as a continent, and most importantly, to ensure that we have all hands on deck as we implement the commitments that the African Union and the continent we have undertaken to drive the transformation of Africa. The African citizens need to know who we are, what we do, and why it matters that the work that we do. So having a clear and easy identity is one of the means of communication. That is why we have undertaken the activity to ensure that the commission, the Banjul Commission, has a new logo and revamped website. Now, the new logo, Excellencies, distinguished participants, also comes with a new set of guidelines that stipulate how the logo is to be applied in all the work of the Commission, its documents, its reports, its giveaway gifts, its business cards, and how they get to engage with all the stakeholders and partners. So we also have a revamped website for the Banjul Commission to make it more functional, more user-friendly, easy to navigate, and a versatile website that has multiple multimedia functionalities and information. And therefore, we are glad that you're here with us today as we celebrate that 5 years of the Commission, and they also get to launch their new communication assets. Excellencies, distinguished participants, allow me at this point to humbly of the new logo and the website of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. We humbly call upon the Excellencies to walk to the right side, to the left side of the podium and unveil where the unveiling ceremony will take place. I will now call upon the Acting Executive Secretary to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Ma'am Lindy Wikamalo. Kindly walk to the left side of the podium, and you will be joined by Her Excellency, Madam, my Vice Chair of the Banjul Commission. Ma'am Excellency, kindly join us to the left. I will also humbly, on Human and People's Rights, His Excellency Remigo Lumbu to also join us on the left side of the podium. Your Excellency, Honorable Justice Hassan Jalal, the Chief Justice of the Charter on Human and People's Rights, allow me to also invite you to join us. Your Excellency, Professor Ismail Badir Fall, the Keeper of Seals and the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Senegal, I will also kindly invite you to the left. Excellencies, Excellencies, I will now invite you, led by the Chair of the Banjul Commission, to cut the ribbon and unveil the new logo of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, joined by the other Excellencies. Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the new logo, the new identity of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Congratulations to this commission on your new look, and we'll also invite the technical team to show us the website as well as Thank you very much. Can we please give them a big round of applause? Thank you very much, Excellencies. I will now hand over the program back to Ms. Lindiwe Kumalo to steer us with the rest of the program. Thank you very much.